Hello, I'm Jessica Rivera with your latest news break. In San Francisco, California, the state's legislation is calling out the city's public school district for trying to exploit a loophole in order to receive $12 million in state reopening money. In New York, 5 teenagers were transferred to a county jail after a fight at a children's detention center over the weekend. According to authorities, 4 deputies were injured in the brawl. And in the Oregon wilderness, a missing 69-year-old fisherman, Harry Burley, was found alive after going missing for 17 nights following a camping trip. The 69-year-old was found in a makeshift shelter he built himself and was taken to the hospital with minor pain. And that's your latest news break. Now back to America's Voice Live.
Thank you, Jessica, for that update. Well, it's been 62 days since Vice President Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border crisis. And for an administration that touts transparency, we still don't know much about her efforts to stem the flow of migrants at the southern border or work with the Northern Triangle countries.
Of course, and she hasn't even held one news conference on the issue. Joining our panel to discuss this story and much more, Liberty Guard Chair Bob Barr is here. President of the New York Republicans Club, Gavin Wax, joining us, and president of wallbuilders.com, Tim Barton. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Louisiana Senator John Kennedy had some wise words on the border crisis. I want to play those for you all, and then we'll get your response. Listen to this.
I've been to the border. If you believe the border is closed, you believe in the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and that Jimmy Hoffa died of natural causes. We'll have 2 million people come into the United States this year illegally, thanks to the Biden administration. They have no idea who they are, except they're coming from all over the world. The Biden administration has almost completely halted any kind of deportation of people already here illegally. America has become one giant sanctuary city.
He's like a national treasure, isn't he? I'm going to go to Bob Barr first. Bob, you speak Southern. You're from Georgia, so you speak the language of Senator Kennedy maybe better than anyone here. I mean, he is to the point. He has sarcasm, but he is blunt and he is honest. And frankly, it looks like he's right. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's why the left hates him so much. That's why the mainstream, the so-called mainstream media doesn't have him on. It's why you and other realistic, true news sources do have him on, because he does speak in facts, and he does it with a certain sense of humor, which is very, very important. What the senator is saying is probably, if anything, an understatement in terms of the number of illegals coming into this country this year. 2 million coming in this year alone would be on the low side. That's even according to the government's own figures. So it's likely much higher than that. And if we don't do something to get a handle on it, and it does not look like this administration is going to, it is going to be extremely costly in so many ways, not just in terms of economics, but our culture as well over the years ahead, not just for this coming year.
And Tim, I believe you are in Texas, if I'm right, not necessarily at the border, but in the state. And this is affecting Texas also quite significantly. So when you hear the border is closed, what's your response to that?
Yeah, that's an utterly ridiculous statement to say the border is closed. We know the border is not closed. We have a lot of friends who live in the southern part of Texas, and they're dealing with people coming across their farms and their ranches every single day. The Biden administration, and changing some of the policies on the border and literally allowing people to roam freely, to run across the border, it's allowed Mexico, or maybe even incentivized Mexico, to open up their southern border. One of the things that President Trump did, his policies were so strong, were when we did not allow people to come across our border freely, they were then stuck in Mexico. And Mexico realized, we don't want all of these hundreds of thousands of people here, so they closed their southern border to stop the migration of the caravans. And right now, because America's letting in all these people, Mexico's allowing everybody to come through their nation. And so we don't have allies that are helping us in this fight. And so, as was identified, the 2 million is a low estimate. 2 million people are those that they think that they will actually capture that are coming across the border. This doesn't include those that we know that are getting across illegally that will never be captured, and even those that are turned loose throughout the nation.
Yeah. And Gavin, I took a quick glance here. 2 million people. Let's just say that's true. That's more people than live in Phoenix or Philadelphia or San Diego or Dallas or San Jose. Think about how many people that really is. This is an enormous amount of people if it turns out to be true. And if Tim's right, that's on the low side. I mean, this is beyond a crisis, isn't it?
This is a planned crisis. This is an attack on American wages. This influx of more than 2 million people into this country will suppress native-born wages, their job prospects as we face an economic crisis. It's also an attack on our culture, as the gentleman from Georgia said earlier, and it's an attack on our sovereignty. This is all part of the left-wing agenda to completely reshape this country, to transform it into something completely different. We need to shut the borders. We need to deport illegals. We need an immigration moratorium to get this country back on track. This is just one of many issues that the Biden administration has brought onto this country, an issue that was being handled magnificently by the Trump administration. So it's unfortunate to see what's happening on our southern border. And if we remember from November, these counties in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas all swung heavily in favor of Trump. People on the border know it's a crisis. They know it's chaotic. And this is a great issue for Republicans to take on.
Well, Gavin, you make great points, and I'll even take that a step further and say that one of the things that we do know about illegal immigration is that it hurts our minority communities the most, and our minority communities are not happy about this despite what the mainstream media is telling you. But I want to move on to our next topic, President Biden's Green New Deal. Any device with a lithium-ion charged rechargeable battery relies on cobalt to recharge. So that means every smartphone you have, every tablet, every laptop, electric vehicles even, they use cobalt. And much of that cobalt is mined in other countries. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the quest for cobalt comes at a cost, according to a class action lawsuit filed in 2019 by parents looking to hold Apple, Google, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla accountable for profiting off child labor, using children to mine cobalt and keep up with the rising demand. So 60% of the world's cobalt originates in DRC. It's a very unstable country, and these companies say they have no control over who's mining in these foreign countries. But child labor practices in DRC have been widely reported in media outlets throughout the years. In fact, children are dying. This is the lawsuit. They've been maimed and they're dying. There are mines falling in on them. So I want to go to you, Chairman Barr. Why are we not saying as Americans, this is a human rights violation? We have to step into this situation. We have to look at our manufacturing processes and we have to look at these companies.
Well, nothing's happening because the establishment does not want anything to happen. You know, it's a perfect example of what Senator Kennedy might say is the left being hoisted on its own petard. On the one hand, you have the left wringing its hands over child labor and all manner of civil liberties and civil rights around the world. And on the other hand, you have these companies like Google and Facebook and Apple that rely very much on the labor coming from or that brings their products into this country, the raw materials for them. So they really don't want to do anything about it. And what they do with this lawsuit, I think that's pending in the federal courts in Washington, will be very interesting to watch because they should say, oh, you caught us. Okay, we're not going to bring this stuff in anymore until these countries change their child labor laws, which is not going to happen, of course. But it's simply a perfect example, another one, of the hypocrisy that infects everything that the left does these days.
And it's not just cobalt. There are a variety of minerals and rare earth materials that need to be used for powering all of the devices that Tudor outlined there. And the other problem that I'm seeing here, Tim, is the fact that this administration is deciding to outsource to places like China and Russia to fill in the blanks in other places and not help out American mining companies and union workers that they say they care about. Once again, the union workers get the short end of the stick in the mining operations in America because they're bending the knee to the Green New Deal first, and America comes last. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We saw this level of hypocrisy when the Biden administration says we're closing the pipelines here in America, and then the same week, a week later, we're actually giving funding to Russia. We're lifting sanctions in Russia as they then open up their pipelines. This level of hypocrisy is something that I think a lot of Americans are seeing, but also, even as Mr. Barr pointed out, with this level of hypocrisy, it's something we see in big tech. It's something we see in these big corporations where we can talk about how evil and terrible it is what's happening with these children that are being used in these mines for cobalt, but we know at the same time that China uses slave labor for much of what they do. A lot of the Apple products that are being produced is slave labor. And so when you see the Biden administration saying we're going to solve these problems, we're going to make America go green. Well, America already is much more green than China is, and many of these other nations than Russia is. And we're lifting sanctions on these nations while at the same time penalizing Americans. And they criticize President Trump for saying we're going to put America first. But now we're seeing what happens when you put other nations first and you say, America, you are last. It costs us jobs, wages, and now we're seeing the inflation, even at the gas pump, from what's happening from this Biden administration.
Gavin, is a green America under the Biden administration actually a lie? Because we hear him coming out. We heard him just a month ago coming out and saying we want to build batteries in Pennsylvania from now on. But that would really just be assembling batteries. You would still be mining in these other countries and destroying their environment and killing their children, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. It's a total lie. This is all just moral posturing on behalf of the Biden administration and all these woke corporate entities who love to preach about how much they care about Black lives or any other social justice cause. Meanwhile, as you've all outlined, they're using child labor in Africa and China to create their cheap products to then sell back to the United States, where Americans could buy it on credit because many Americans don't have jobs. They're not being paid properly. Their jobs have been shipped overseas. This all ties back to globalism and this constant pursuit of cheaper and cheaper goods. We should be focusing on bringing manufacturing back to our shores, bringing high quality jobs back into our states, and push away from all this green nonsense, which is just cover for corporate profits and for corporate wokeism gone awry.
All right, gentlemen, good conversation. We always appreciate the input from our panel. Again, that's true today. Thank you for being here. Now, coming up after the break, a Florida school is receiving backlash after photoshopping female students' yearbook photos. We'll be sharing why those photos were changed right here on AVL. Don't go anywhere.